Russia collusion, which, of course, we had 2-year investigation on that front. They proved nothing. So Bill Barr was tasked to point somebody, in this case John Durham, to find out what was behind all of this. Plus, we got this 300-page report. Well, when Bill Barr was interviewed this week on the Durham report, he did not spare any language to tell us what he thought of what was going on and what Durham proved in his report. Here's a little bit of that, cut number 2.
What this has shown is that the source, and there are really 2 sources and drivers of this whole ugly episode, and that is Hillary Clinton's campaign, who launched a smear campaign that was based on getting Russian sources to spread false information about Donald Trump and peddle it to the press and to the government, the FBI. And both the press and the FBI abandoned any semblance of professionalism and took up the cause with a vengeance. I think the real story here from the FBI's perspective is what an abomination this was, this so-called investigation.
Yeah, an abomination, you're right. And Bill Barr, the former Attorney General there, makes reference to another guilty party in all of this, and that's the mainstream media. It has now been shown, and I've been involved in news media now for about 40 years, but even I am shocked at the level of deception the mainstream media is willing to partake in to protect a political party. I wrote an article many years ago, actually, about this. It was called Agents of Change, and that's what our media has become, the mainstream media, the so-called legacy media. The major networks, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the New York Times, the Washington Post. Basically, they are all in for the Democratic Party. I think it was Pew Research back a few years ago actually did a poll. 90% of the people, reporters, so-called reporters, who cover Washington, D.C. are Democrats. They vote Democrat. You've got to understand, if I was an advisor to a conservative Republican, just warn these people ahead of, if you agree to an interview with NPR or CNN or NBC, you know you're talking to a Democrat. You've got to understand that. And so when you view their news reports, you've got to understand that they are Democrats. These news media people, they are Democrats. So you had this collusion, really, of the Democratic Party, the FBI, the justice system, and the media, all working together against Donald Trump. And one of the main players amongst the Democrats, of course, was Adam Schiff. He led the charge. Remember him telling people, I have absolute evidence that Donald Trump worked with the Russians. Well, those clips will play back this week in the wake of the Durham report. And then Kevin McCarthy, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, responded to that. Cut number 1.
So there's clear evidence on the issue of collusion, and this adds to that body of evidence. There's ample evidence of collusion in plain sight, and that is true.
Have Democrats found any evidence of collusion?
Yes, we have. You can see evidence in plain sight on the issue of collusion, pretty compelling evidence.
It really raises the question about Adam Schiff. Remember when he told the American people he had proof? Remember when he told them he didn't know the whistleblower? And what he put America through and openly lied to us? It raises a lot of questions about his character, his standing inside of Congress, or whether he should even be in Congress.
Yeah, good point. There's some are saying, impeach him. By the way, Adam Schiff now wants to run for the Senate seat that's going to become available in California. Hey, you're listening in California today. You really want Adam Schiff there working for you? A guy who has a problem with the truth. Another commentary that came out this week, and I thought this was really good. Greg Gutfeld, who is well-known host on Fox News. In fact, he's got a new show that's coming up that's moving his show to an earlier time slot. And he had an interesting take on all of this, on where the Democrats are and where the mainstream media is. So I want to play that for you. Cut number 6.
You have people saying that the country will not survive Trump, then your moral duty is to cheat, right? And you should cheat. Like if somebody is telling everybody that this person is a modern day Hitler, it is your duty to do whatever is possible to stop him. In fact, if you actually play by the rules, you're a traitor, right? So they created a devil that was so big and so vast, it made all actions permissible. And it made every institution, as the judge was saying, subject to suspicion. Right? So you can bury stories, you can create hoaxes, you can fund smears. It can go anywhere because this person must be stopped. It's Hitler, an existential threat. And so what happens is now we're left and none of it's true. And so we had a half a decade hoax that infected and undermined every institution because we were made to believe this person is evil. And then people make fun of people who are skeptical about an election. Why shouldn't they be skeptical about an election when the DOJ and the FBI and the mainstream media and the tech companies and the Chamber of Commerce are all in on the same thing? Why shouldn't the election be called into question, right? Shouldn't a hero try to fix the election, right? Shouldn't a hero do that? If you're up against Hitler, that's where we ended up. And you can't go and condemn people for so-called conspiracy theories when you were going around telling everybody this guy was worse than Hitler.
You know, it's interesting, Gutfield referring to, conspiracy theories and those dumping on people. There was Clay Travis, I think one of the other commentators on Fox this week, says if anything we've learned, there is, when it comes to conspiracy theories and truth, they're about 6 months apart. Conspiracy theory, give it 6 months, oh, it's really true. And that's where we are today. Elon Musk, he was a darling of the media before he purchased Twitter and started to clean up things there. Now the media doesn't like him. He was interviewed on, I think it was CNBC this week, and he was asked about these conspiracy theories, and we had kind of an interesting interchange. Cut number 3.
Let's talk a bit about your tweets, because it comes up a lot. Even today, it came up in, anticipation of this. I mean, you do some tweets that seem to be, or at least give support to some who would call others conspiracy theories.
Well, yes, but I mean, honestly, some of these conspiracy theories have turned out to be true.
Which ones?
Well, like the Hunter Biden laptop.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that was a pretty big deal. There was Twitter and others engaged in active suppression of information that was relevant to the public. That's a terrible thing that happened. That's election interference.
I love that response from that left-wing anchor there. That was true what you said. What a moment. Elon Musk, I don't know his spiritual state, but I'm really enjoying what he's doing at Twitter, cleaning it up. But it is really interesting how the mainstream media has now come to, and I read a lot of Associated Press because we use Associated Press on our website, American Family News, AFN.net, and I have to clean up their bias before we put it on the site. But it's really interesting how they've changed their attitude towards Elon Musk. By the way, as of late Thursday afternoon, the whistleblowers were testifying, as I mentioned yesterday on Capitol Hill. As of late yesterday afternoon, do you know the Associated Press had not done one story on those whistleblowers about the FBI? Now, why do you suppose that is? If you ever thought there was fairness in the mainstream media, forget it, folks. They are all in on the left and the left's agenda. No matter what it is, whether they're talking about transsexuals, what they're talking about, the efforts, say, of Ron DeSantis to protect kids in school against garbage. They're all against anything conservative, anything pro-family. You got to be aware of that. It's all part of the spiritual battle that's going on in this country right now. We'll talk about that and much more when we come back on the next segment of The Core here on a Friday.
Here's Ellis Craft of Reach a Village Ministries. months ago, a student in a village school attempted to end his life. 2 other students that were in a discipleship group helped prevent the tragedy. These 2 students befriended him and shared the hope of Jesus. When the news reached the principal, the Lord opened her eyes and heart. Instead of wanting to shut down discipleship groups, the principal requested every classroom have access to a disciple maker. This is just one example of how God is using ministry partners with Reach a Village. Your gift today will be doubled. $50 will reach 100 children, $500 would reach 1,000 children. To give, I want you to go to reachavillage.org or call 833-773-2247. Again, to call Reach a Village and talk to our staff, that's 833-7-REACH-7.
This is Raising Godly Girls Minute with Patty Garibay of American Heritage Girls.
Did you know that girls are more likely to be overlooked for mental health services compared to their male peers? In fact, according to findings in the American Journal of Family Therapy, the lack of mental health services provided to girls at a young age may be a factor in why more women than men are diagnosed with depression in adulthood. If you find that your girl struggles to appropriately express her emotions, especially in the wake of difficulty or trauma of any sort, this could be a sign she could benefit from counseling. Consult with your church or a Christian counselor to seek out help for your girl. God desires a rich, joy-filled life for your girl. Being attentive to her emotional needs early in life could help her in the long run.
We are all called to raise up the next generation of Christian leaders. Learn more about empowering girls through the love of God at raisinggodlygirls.com. Hey friends, it's Jessica Peck, Dr. Nurse Mama, as your 1-minute parenting coach. Does your teen have a code word to say safe? Teens often get themselves in situations over their heads. They don't go out with the intent on driving home with someone who's been drinking. They don't plan to go on a date where they feel pressured. But it's hard to explain that over the phone sometimes. As parents, when we hear this news, we feel angry, but truthfully, we are terrified of something threatening their safety. Using a code word makes you a safe rescue in emergencies. It can be a single word or even an emoji. And when sent, it means I'll pick you up anytime, anywhere, no questions asked until the next morning. Then your teen is safe and emotions have cooled for rational conversation. I'll see you on the Dr. Nurse Mama podcast here on American Family Radio.
At the Core podcasts are available at AFR.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
And yes, indeed, the Friday edition of The Core. Fred Jackson sitting in for Walker today. As we talked about early on in the program, it was a busy week in Washington, D.C. And it was busy in the good sense that now that the Republicans control the House, we're getting some really fascinating testimony from the witnesses that they are bringing in. So you can hear firsthand from people that, well, you won't hear their stories in the mainstream media, or if you do, those stories are discounted. And one of the other hearings this week included testimony from Mark Houck. Now, you may remember him. He was a pro-life person. He's in Pennsylvania. And the story that we first got to know Mark Houck was basically he was demonstrating outside a Planned Parenthood facility in Philadelphia. And he had his 12-year-old son there with him. And he wasn't even near like the front door. He was down at the Planned Parenthood was on the corner of a block there, and he was down the street a bit from the opening. But one of the Planned Parenthood supporters came out and started hassling his 12-year-old son. Mark Houck, basically, as a dad would do, shoved this guy back, just a gentle shove. Local authorities didn't even charge Mark Houck. But you know, our federal government did. Yeah, our Attorney General, Merrick Garland, decided, let's make an example of Mark Houck. So a short time later, Mark Houck is at his home. And I think it was around breakfast time, sitting around the table. He has 5 or 6 kids. And the report is about 20 FBI agents arrive at his house, surrounded, and he's hauled away in handcuffs. Now, of course, you know the end of the story. He went through a trial. The trial, of course, not guilty. But Mark Houck came and testified this week before a House hearing to tell his story about this FBI raid. We'll talk about it, but here's a little bit of what Mark Houck had to testify. Cut 7.
On September 23rd, my home was raided by 10 unmarked and marked units, state troopers, federal law enforcement personnel. I had 5 federal agents on my doorstep at 6:30 in the morning with long guns pointed at me and my 7 children. They banged on the door and they said, open up. They did not even declare who they were that day. They didn't even ask me, could you please open the door with the FBI? They just said, open up. I went to the door, I was up. I said, who is it? They said, it's the FBI, open up. So I opened up the door peacefully. I said, please stay calm. I have 7 babies in here. They pointed M16 guns at me and my wife. My wife comes down and says, do you have a warrant for his arrest? They said, we're taking him with or without a warrant. And my wife said, you can't do that. That's kidnapping.
Yeah. Just put yourself in Mark Houck's shoes. He's not out there with guns or not out there with camouflage apparel on. He's just out there drawing attention to the fact that Planned Parenthood kills unborn babies. He's a pro-life demonstrator. But our Attorney General and the FBI decided to make an example of him. And so they show up in force. Now you talk about a politicized decision. So why do I say that? Why is it politicized to do that? Well, I'm not aware of the FBI doing that to, let's say, a Black Lives Matter protester. You know, those protests that burn down buildings, attack police cars, attack police officers. I'm not aware of this kind of response from the FBI. Maybe it's the case they didn't bother go to their houses to arrest them. And if they did arrest anybody, Kamala Harris comes along and helps bail them out of jail. So is it any wonder why, if you weren't skeptical before, all of these matters that you heard about this week in testimony kind of just underlines again and again and again what has happened in this country. A weaponized judicial system against those who hold, and I'll say, Christian values, who are strong patriots. I'm not sure where this is going, but I do believe the American public is becoming far more educated and seeing the proof of this. Now, if Mark Houck's testimony and the others that you heard, the Durham report, I've mentioned about the whistleblowers, the FBI whistleblowers, 4 or 5 of them at least have come forward to talk about what's been going on inside the FBI. And I wanted to play a little bit of the testimony that some of them gave yesterday at that hearing, the Judicial Committee hearing, House Judicial Committee, under the leadership of Jim Jordan. Now, before the hearings began yesterday, there was a news conference. Jim Jordan held a news conference to kind of lay out what we were going to hear later in the day from these whistleblowers. And they played a video of I think a now former FBI agent, George Hill. And it was rather startling, I guess, to a certain extent, but it went to perhaps provide evidence of some theories that have been out there that the FBI may have had plants inside the January 6th protesters that went up to Capitol Hill. So we had video testimony of George Hill that we heard yesterday about, he was an agent in the Boston field office of the FBI, and his encounter with bosses about looking at video of what happened on January 6th. There's about 11,000 hours of video or something, and he ran into opposition about looking at that video, displaying that video, showing that video, because it might show people that were FBI agents or informers. Wow. Listen for yourself. Cut number 12.
The SSA for CT2 said, happy to do it. Show us where they were inside the Capitol, and we'll look into it. To which WFO said, we can't show you those videos unless you can tell us the exact time and place those individuals were inside the Capitol. To which the SSA responded back, and I was privy to these conversations firsthand. Why can't you show us? Why can't you just send us give us access to the 11,000 hours of video that's available? Because there may be UC's undercover officers or CHS's confidential human sources on those videos whose identity we need to protect.
You know, it's almost like it's a movie. Like this cannot be real. It cannot be happening in this country. But that testimony, if you listen to it, and if you believe it's 100% accurate, that the FBI, the Justice Department, had people. Were they encouraging those protesters that went up the Capitol Hill that day? Were they leading them on? There's been talk about that. But there you have George Hill talking about, there's certain portions of this video that we don't want to use because it might reveal informers, undercover agents, UCs. Is that what they call them? UCs, undercover agents. Wow. These are FBI people, folks. This is not some, Tucker Carlson. This is not, a Fox host going on and on about conspiracy theories. These are FBI agents who witnessed and heard conversations. And of course, now part of the whistleblower story is that they are being punished for coming forward and telling the truth about what's going on. One of the other whistleblowers who gave testimony yesterday on Capitol Hill was Garrett O'Boyle. He talked about the FBI punishing whistleblowers. Cut number 10.
The smear campaign, disgusting as it is unsurprising. Despite our oath to uphold the Constitution, too many in the FBI aren't willing to sacrifice for the hard right over the easy wrong. They see what becomes of whistleblowers, how the FBI destroys their careers, suspends them under false pretenses, takes their security clearances and pay with no true options for real recourse or remedy. This is by design. It creates an Orwellian atmosphere that silences opposition and discussion. We know what is right to do, yet we too often refuse to do what is right because of the difficulty and suffering it incurs. I couldn't knowingly continue on this path silently without speaking out against the weaponization I witnessed, even if it meant losing my job, my career, my livelihood, my family's home, and now my anonymity.
So there you have it. You have to wonder, these are people willing to risk their careers, risk their ability to get other jobs. Many of these whistleblowers, many of these FBI personnel are people with very outstanding military backgrounds.